Alrighty, section 4.4 is about using corresponding parts of congruent triangles. So once you prove that two triangles are congruent, then they're going to ask you to prove that a piece or one piece is congruent to the other piece on the other triangle that it's congruent with. So we're going to use the acronym, and you need to write this down. And that is CPCTC, which stands for congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Yes, I said that. Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So that means if you prove that two triangles, look how beautiful those triangles are congruent, then I can say, okay, you already proved those are congruent. Now prove that this is congruent to this. So it's just one extra step. So when you're doing this, first prove the triangles are congruent. And then state the part to prove, they want you to prove, and use reason congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so that is just one extra step from what we've been doing. Okay, so we have our first one. Let's set it up. Okay, and they give us, so step one is they give us KBC is congruent to angle ACB, and angle K is congruent to angle A, and your reason is given. Okay, and they want us to prove that KB, so the side on the left, equals the side on the right, CA. Okay, first we have to prove that the triangles are congruent. How would you go about this? They gave us two angles. We definitely need some sides in there, at least one. So to me, I see the reflexive property, or to use the reflexive property on that diagonal side. So that would be side BC is congruent to side BC because of the reflexive property of congruence. Okay, so we got that. We listed this right now. So we have an angle side. Hey, that's one of our properties. We can use that. So angle side is the reason. So we're going to say angle side. So in the past few lessons, I had you write it exactly how they gave it to you. But now they're not giving to you the congruency statement of the triangles. You have to make your own. So remember, the order does matter. So whichever way you have to think it in your brain, and I'm going to talk it out the way I think about it, but make sure you keep them in order. So I'm going to do triangle K is my first letter, and it has two lines. B will be my second letter, and then C will be my last one because it doesn't have any, it's all it's left, right? I should do a different color. Let's do yellow. So C. Okay, so now my first letter needs to be the one K I used, so that would I have to use the other angle that has two marks. So that would be A. Then I used B, so the one that has one mark, one sign of congruency, so that would be C for the other triangle. I need to put the triangle sign, I forgot that. Then the last letter would be B. All right. So now we prove that the triangles are congruent. Sweet. So we can say that those two segments are congruent. So last step, KB is congruent to AC. What did I say your reason is going to be? Do you remember what we wrote down? CPCTC, congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, one down, three to go. Here we go. Statements. Reasons. Step 1, B A is congruent to D, I can't write today, DA, and CA is congruent to EA. Okay, so they told us, and they marked it, that those two sets of lines are congruent. So CA and AE, BA and AD. So we have two sides. So we need either the third side, which I don't see any way to prove it, or the an angle. Okay, I see an angle. This angle is the one I see. How can I just mark that they're congruent? Well, they're vertical angles. So then this will be, remember you have to give me 3 letters since it's in the middle. Angle BAC is congruent to angle DAE. And I said that was because they are vertical angles. So that would be the vertical angles theorem. Okay, now do we have an F? We have a side, an angle in the middle, and a side. Side, angle, side is a property. So, be side, angle, side. Now I'm going to have 2 triangles are congruent. You have to slow down, okay? I'm going to start with my first letter is C. C's matching angle would be E. Then I'm going to do the middle. So the second angle would be A. Second angle would be A. And then we would have B and D. Okay, so we got those. We said the triangles are congruent. They're wanting us to prove that angle C is congruent to angle E. Yes, they are. So angle C is congruent to angle E. Why? Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay. Next one. We have statements, reasons. So we have AB is congruent to AC, and M is the midpoint of BC. And that's given. Okay, so what did they give us? They said M is the midpoint, and then those two sides are congruent. Well, let's talk about what the midpoint is. Why did they give that to us? What does the midpoint mean? Midpoint is the middle. So if M is the middle of BC, well, then that means that BM and MC are congruent. So let's write that down. So BM and MC are congruent because why? Use the vocabulary they used. That would be the definition of a midpoint. All right, so now we have an angle and a side. Looks like we need, or sorry, we have two sides. We don't have any angles. No, we don't have any angles. So we have two sides, so we either need an angle or need a side. I see the reflexive property, so we haven't talked about that yet. So AM is congruent to AM. Why? Because of the reflexive property, of course. Now, we have these that are congruent. So what do we have? Well, we have all three sides. We've listed them. So do we have enough? Sure. We do. It's going to be side, 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 because we have all three sides. I'm going to save some room. I'm writing too big. So that would be triangle. It's congruent to triangle. Let's do the really little angle. That would be A on both of them. So A and an A over there. I'm going to go to the inside angle or the middle angle. M is going to be my second. And then the last one is going to be the outside, so B and C. So AMB and AMC. So we've said those they are congruent, so that means what they wanted us to prove, angles AMB is congruent to angle AMC. Okay, and so that's going to be the congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Last one. So let's set this up really fast and write our given. Okay, so they're giving us that and they want us to prove H is the midpoint. So let's first prove the triangles because that's what we're doing. So they gave us an angle and a side. So we either need another angle or another side. The only thing I can see to do is the vertical angles. So you got this angle and this angle must be congruent because they're vertical. That's what we have to list next. Angle KHL is congruent to angle MHN. That would be the vertical angles theorem. Okay, so now we've got an angle, and then a side. Hey, there's our property right there, angle, angle, side. So this would be angle, angle, side. Give me two triangles. How about I do the angle that has no marking first? So that would be angle K and angle N. Then I'll do the angle that has one marking on it next. So L and then M. And then the inside angle would be H and H. You can have it in a different order. Just make sure it's in the right order. Oh, okay. Sorry. So now, can I just say H is the midpoint? Is that saying this piece of the one triangle is congruent to the other piece of the other triangle? No. We can't just, that's not what it's asking. So if H is the midpoint, I'm going to write this down so you can visualize it a little bit, of LM. So if H is the midpoint, then what does that mean? Well, that must mean then LH is congruent to HM. Can I state that piece next? Yes, I can. I can state this piece because why? Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So that would be LH is congruent to HM because of congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, last step. What does it mean for LH to be congruent to HM? Well, we can't just end there because we didn't have it say this piece right here. You have to always have it end with what they said to prove. So we're gonna say, now that we've listed that those two segments are congruent, we can say H is the midpoint of LM. Why? Because of the definition of a midpoint. Right? That means if the definition of a midpoint says that those two segments are equal or congruent, then it's a midpoint. All right, that is it for 4.4. Thank you for watching.